The first sign of the invasion was not the roar of a diesel engine, but the quiet, precise geometry of 3 wooden stakes topped with fluorescent pink flagging tape. They had been driven into the damp earth just inside my property line, forming an obtuse triangle that pointed directly at the heart of the wetlands. I found them on a Tuesday morning. October 15th. The air crisp with the coming autumn. A man in a clean white hard hat and a high-visibility vest was sighting a 4th stake through a theodolite mounted on a tripod. He was standing on the common area, a 50-foot-wide strip of manicured turf that separated my 5-acre lot from the rest of the subdivision. But his target was well within my land. I walked toward him, my boots making soft impressions in the dewy grass. My heart rate remained steady, a discipline learned over 20 years as an Army engineer, where panic was a luxury you couldn't afford. "Good morning," I said, my voice even. He glanced up, squinting against the low sun. "Morning. Can I help you?" I stopped a respectful 10 feet away, a distance that was neither confrontational nor submissive. "Just doing a survey for the HOA," he said, turning a knob on his instrument. "Common Area Improvement Project." "You're on the common area," I acknowledged, gesturing with an open hand. "But your stakes are on my private property." I pointed to the nearest one, its pink flag fluttering 3 feet inside the line of ancient cypress trees that marked my boundary. "That's Lot 27. It belongs to me." He shrugged, a gesture of practiced indifference. "My work order shows the project line running along this drainage swale. The HOA board approved it. If you have an issue, you'll need to talk to them." I pulled out my phone. "I understand you're just doing your job. Mind if I get your name and your company's name?" He hesitated, his professional mask tightening. "Why?" "For my records," I said, hitting the record button on my phone's video app. I kept the phone low, aimed at his boots, making the recording less obvious. "This is a recorded conservation easement. Any work done here requires county approval, not just an HOA work order. I just want to make sure everyone is protected." His posture changed. The mention of a recorded easement was a specific, legal incantation he wasn't expecting. "The name's Rick. Company is Precision Surveying. Look, I'm just marking the line they gave me on the map." "I appreciate that. Rick, I'm just informing you, politely, that you and your equipment are currently aiding in an act of trespass. I'd advise you to remove the stakes from my property and confine your work to the common area until the HOA can provide you with a legally recorded plat map that supersedes the one on file with the county." I let the words hang in the air, each one chosen to convey calm authority, not anger. I was not a resident complaining about a hedge. I was an officer informing him of the operational parameters. Rick looked from me to the stakes, then back to his tripod. The confidence had drained from his face, replaced by the weary annoyance of a man caught in a procedural crossfire. He sighed. "Fine. I'll stick to the common side for now, but you'll be hearing from the board." "I'm counting on it," I said. I stopped the recording and watched as he reluctantly pulled the 3 stakes from my soil, the wet earth sighing as they came free. He tossed them into the back of his truck with a clatter and went back to his tripod, his focus now carefully aimed away from my land. I walked back to my house, the small victory feeling less like a triumph and more like the first volley in a war I didn't want, but was uniquely prepared to fight. Inside, I went to the metal filing cabinet in my study, the same one my father had used for 30 years. He was the one who bought this land, a forgotten, abused parcel, left for dead by a bankrupt golf course developer in the 80s. He'd seen past the construction debris and the invasive species. He saw the water, the natural flow of it, and spent 2 decades patiently, lovingly, restoring it. He'd turned a developer's scar into a sanctuary. My father, a quiet civil engineer with a poet's soul, had taught me to read the land not as a commodity, but as a living system. His legacy wasn't in a will. It was in the root systems of the native reeds, the clarity of the water, and the quiet chorus of frogs that sang every night. I pulled out the folder labeled Lot 27, Deed and Title. The documents were thick, worn at the creases. I spread the original plat map across my desk. It was a beautiful, hand-drafted document from 1994, recorded with Allen County. There, along the entire rear of my property, was a dotted line and the clear, unambiguous text, conservation easement. No improvements permitted without county approval. This was my shield. It was not a suggestion. It was a legal covenant tied to the land in perpetuity. Next, I opened the binder containing the governing documents for the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I flipped through the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the CC&Rs. A dense labyrinth of legalese governing everything from mailbox colors to lawn height. My father had hated the HOA, calling it a committee of beige tyrants, but had tolerated it as a necessary evil of modern suburbia. I found the section on property maintenance and scanned the clauses. My eyes landed on one I'd dismissed before as boilerplate. Figure 8.4.2, Preservation of Community View Corridors and Water Runoff Pathways. It was vague, a catch-all that could mean anything or nothing. I had a sinking feeling I knew what they were going to make it mean. My phone rang. It was my sister, Chloe. "Hey, Jen," she said. Her voice perpetually rushed. Chloe was a successful realtor, a pragmatist who measured the world in comps and closing costs. "Just got off the phone with Brenda from next door. She said there was some drama with a surveyor on your lawn this morning." "Just a misunderstanding about the property line," I said, keeping my tone light. "Jensen, please tell me you didn't pull your retired Army officer routine on some poor guy making $12 an hour." I was polite. I informed him of the legal status of the land. She groaned. "You know who the board president is, right? Karen Ballinger. I sold her that house on the cul-de-sac. She's a bulldog. She doesn't care about legal statuses. She cares about getting her way. Whatever they're planning. Just let them do it. Fighting the board is a death sentence for your property value. No one wants to buy a house with a lien on it or a history of litigation. It's a red flag the size of Texas. This isn't about property value, Chloe. It's about Dad's legacy. It's a protected wetland. It's a 5-acre patch of mud to everyone else in this neighborhood," she said, her voice softening slightly. "I know it's important to you, but these people are vicious. They'll bury you in paperwork and fines until you give up or move out. Please, just be careful." "Always am," I said. We hung up, and I stared out the window at the wetlands. The morning sun filtered through the cypress leaves, dappling the dark water with light. Chloe was right about the risk, but she was wrong about it being a patch of mud. It was a living, breathing system that managed the stormwater for this entire side of the county. The easement wasn't just to protect the birds. It was to protect the houses downstream, including Karen Ballinger's, from flooding. And if she didn't know that, I had a feeling she was about to learn the hard way. The first official salvo arrived a week later, on October 22nd. It wasn't an email or a friendly phone call. It was a crisp, pale green envelope delivered by a mail carrier who required my signature. Certified mail. The universal symbol for this is no longer a conversation. Inside, on thick, embossed letterhead bearing the Whispering Pines HOA logo, was a formal violation notice. It was a masterpiece of polite, bureaucratic aggression. "Dear Mr. Jensen," it began. "This letter serves as a formal notice of a violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions CC&Rs of the Whispering Pines community. An inspection conducted on October 21, 2023, has identified a compliance issue on your property. Lot 27. Violation CC&R, Figure 8.4.2, Preservation of Community View Corridors and Water Runoff Pathways. Description of violation: failure to maintain the natural drainage swale along the rear property line. The area is currently overgrown with unapproved native vegetation, which is obstructing a designated community drainage pathway and impeding natural water runoff from the adjacent common area. My jaw tightened. This was their pretext. They were fabricating a violation, using the very clause I had flagged, to justify their remediation efforts. They weren't building a path. They were simply clearing an obstructed one that they had just invented. It was brilliant in its audacity. The letter continued, outlining the next steps with chilling clarity. Action required. You are required to clear the aforementioned obstruction within 14 days of the date of this notice. This includes the removal of all overgrown vegetation and debris from the designated pathway to restore proper drainage function. Furthermore, you are hereby summoned to a hearing with the Board of Directors to discuss this violation. The hearing is scheduled for date: Tuesday, October 29th, 2023, time 7:00 p.m. Location: Whispering Pines Community Center, Meeting Room B. Failure to attend the hearing or remedy the violation within the specified timeframe may result in the imposition of fines, suspension of community privileges, and, if necessary, the board may undertake the remediation at the homeowner's expense, with all costs being assessed to your account. The letter was signed not by an individual, but by the Whispering Pines Board of Directors, an anonymous, monolithic entity. I placed the letter on my desk next to the plat map. This was the inciting incident. The surveyor was a probe. This letter was the formal declaration of war. They weren't interested in the truth. They were building a paper trail, constructing a version of reality where I was the negligent homeowner, and they were the diligent stewards of the community. Every step from here on out would be a battle of documentation. My file against theirs, my recorded facts against their fabricated narrative. The hearing was exactly 1 week away. They were moving fast, trying to keep me on the defensive, but my entire career had been about turning defense into offense, about understanding an opponent's strategy and using its momentum against them. They thought they were dealing with a sentimental homeowner who loved his father's swamp. They were about to find out they were dealing with an engineer who had built and dismantled forward operating bases under enemy fire. And I was much better at this game than they were. Meeting Room B of the Whispering Pines Community Center was a small, sterile box with beige walls, fluorescent lighting that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, and a faint, lingering scent of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. A long folding table stood at the front of the room, behind which sat the Board of Directors, arranged like a panel of judges at a high school science fair. In the center was Karen Ballinger, the president. She was in her late 50s, with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob that looked like it could withstand a hurricane, and tortoiseshell glasses perched on her nose. She offered me a thin, tight smile as I entered, a gesture devoid of any actual warmth. To her right sat Derek Sandell, a smug-looking man in a golf shirt who ran a local insurance agency, and Martha Prentice, head of the garden committee, who clutched a pen and notepad as if preparing to take notes on a hostile witness. The fourth board member, Phil, who managed the community newsletter, looked profoundly bored. "Mr. Jensen, thank you for coming," Karen said, her voice smooth and practiced. "Please, have a seat. We have allotted 15 minutes for this hearing." I sat in the lone plastic chair facing them. It was deliberately placed several feet from their table, creating a clear zone of interrogation. I placed my leather portfolio on my lap, but did not open it yet. As you know from the notice, Karen continued, glancing at a paper in front of her, we are here to discuss a violation of Section 8.4.2 of the Covenants regarding the obstruction of a community drainage pathway on your property. There is no community drainage pathway on my property, I stated calmly. There is a recorded conservation easement. I leaned forward and opened my portfolio, sliding a large, color-printed copy of the official Allen County plat map across the table toward her. I had highlighted my lot and the easement description in yellow. This is the legally recorded plat map for Lot 27 filed with the county in 1994. As you can see, the entire rear of the property is designated as a conservation easement. It explicitly forbids any improvements, which would certainly include clearing a path. Karen glanced at the map for a fraction of a second before pushing it aside with a dismissive flick of her fingers. Her politeness was a weapon. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention, Mr. Jensen. However, the board must also consider the community's master plan. She produced a different document, a newer, glossy map printed on heavy cardstock. It looked professional, but I knew it was meaningless. It showed the entire subdivision. And there, running neatly along my property line, was a thin dotted line labeled Future Pedestrian and Drainage Pathway. This is the development plan approved by the board in 2018, she said, her voice dripping with feigned reasonableness. It identifies that corridor as essential for future community connectivity and stormwater management. Was this plan ever legally recorded with the county, I asked. Derek Sandell scoffed. It's an internal planning document. The board has the authority to interpret the CC&Rs in the best interest of the community. Interpreting the CC&Rs is one thing, I countered, my voice still level. Ignoring a legally recorded easement on private property is another. This map you're showing me has no legal standing. It's a wish list. My plat map is a legal fact. Karen's smile didn't waver. The board's interpretation is that the dense vegetation on your property constitutes an obstruction under Section 8.4.2. The easement protects the land from development. Yes, but it does not exempt the homeowner from basic maintenance, especially when it affects community infrastructure. It was a brilliant, insidious piece of sophistry. They were twisting the very purpose of the conservation easement to leave the land in its natural state into a maintenance violation. The dense vegetation is a functioning wetland ecosystem, I said, trying to control the frustration creeping into my voice. It's not overgrown. It's alive. It manages runoff for this entire area. Clearing it will cause flooding. That is your opinion. Mr. Jensen, Karen said, glancing at the clock on the wall. We have consulted with our own landscape architects, and they disagree. The board's primary concern is the welfare of the entire community. She folded her hands on the table. A motion is in order. Does the board find Lot 27 to be in violation of CC&R Section 8.4.2? Aye, said Derek. Aye, said Martha. Aye, Phil mumbled, barely looking up. Karen nodded. The motion carries, Mr. Jensen. The board has found you in violation. As per the bylaws, you have 14 days from today's date to bring the property into compliance. That means clearing the pathway as specified in the notice. If you fail to comply by November 12th, the board will authorize a contractor to perform the work, and you will be billed for the full amount, in addition to a $1,000 initial fine. Her eyes met mine, cold and triumphant. We trust this resolves the matter. Thank you for your time. The board has another hearing to conduct. I stood up, gathering my plat map. The entire hearing had been a sham. A piece of procedural theater designed to give their illegal land grab a veneer of legitimacy. They had no intention of listening to facts or law. They had their own map, their own rules, and their own version of reality. As I walked out of the sterile, humming room, I knew two things with absolute certainty. First, they fully intended to send bulldozers onto my land in 14 days. Second, I was done playing defense. My next stop would not be the county records office. It would be to find someone who knew how to turn over rocks and see what crawled out from underneath. The name Sarah Gable was given to me by a retired colonel from my old unit. She was the Allen County clerk for 30 years. He'd said, knows where every single document is buried, and has a near-religious hatred for petty tyrants and bureaucratic corruption. If anyone can help you, it's Sarah. I found her in a small, cluttered office above a bookstore in the old part of town. The sign on the door read, Gable Research and Consulting. Sarah was a woman in her late 60s, with a shock of short, silver hair, sharp blue eyes, and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie imaginable, and was unimpressed by all of them. An HOA board is manufacturing violations to seize control of an easement, she said, leaning back in her creaky office chair after I'd laid out the story. How quaintly unoriginal. I handed her the violation notice, and the two maps, my official plat, and the board's glossy fabrication. She studied them for less than a minute, her eyes darting between the two. This one, she said, tapping Karen's map with a pen, is what we in the business call aspirational. It's a drawing. It has no more legal weight than a child's crayon sketch of a unicorn. She pushed it back toward me. Your plat map is the only document that matters. The easement is ironclad. They don't seem to think so. I said, they're sending a contractor in 2 weeks. Then, we need to find out why they're so determined, she said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. This is never about a drainage ditch. Mr. Jensen, it's always about something else. Money, power, or revenge. Usually all three. For the next few days, Sarah became my commanding officer in a war of paper. She showed me how to navigate the county's labyrinthine online databases, how to file Freedom of Information Act requests, and how to read between the lines of corporate filings. Our first breakthrough came from a simple search of state business records. The contractor the HOA had on retainer for community maintenance was a company called KB Contracting, LLC. A quick cross-reference of the company's articles of organization revealed the sole registered agent, Kevin Ballinger, Karen's brother-in-law. Well, Sarah said, peering at the screen over her reading glasses. Nepotism, the bedrock of all small-time corruption. She's not just building a path. She's funneling HOA dues to her family. Next, we focused on the board itself. Sarah had me file a formal records request with the HOA's management company for all board meeting minutes from the past 2 years, as required by state law. A week later, a thick manila envelope arrived. I took it straight to Sarah's office. We spread the pages out on her desk. The minutes were meticulously typed, following Robert's Rules of Order, detailing motions on everything from pool pump repairs to holiday decoration guidelines. But when we got to the sections discussing the Common Area Improvement Project, we hit a wall of black ink. Entire paragraphs were redacted. Motion to approve budget for Phase 1 of the Ridgeview Connector Project. One line read, followed by a large black block. Discussion centered on the proposal from redacted and the facilitation of redacted. Ridgeview Connector, I said aloud. They've never called it that in public. Because Ridgeview Connector sounds a lot more ambitious than drainage ditch maintenance, Sarah mused, tapping the redacted line. They're hiding the scope, the contractor, and the purpose. People this arrogant are always sloppy. They think redacting a document is the same as making the truth disappear. This was the moment the campaign shifted. The black bars on the page were no longer just an obstacle. They were a target. The truth was in there, and Sarah knew just how to get it. She made a phone call to a friend, a woman who still worked deep in the county's planning department. It was a brief, cryptic conversation filled with shared history and inside jokes. "Give me 48 hours," Sarah said after she hung up. "My friend owes me a favor from that zoning fiasco back in '08. She thinks she remembers seeing the unredacted proposal when the developer's lawyers first came sniffing around." The call came 2 days later. Sarah's voice was electric. "Get down here. Jensen, you are not going to believe this." When I arrived, she had a new set of documents spread across her desk, printouts from a PDF she'd received in a discreet email. They were the unredacted board minutes, and they told the real story. The blacked-out sections revealed everything. The Ridgeview connector was not a simple walking path. It was phase 1 of a secret, multi-stage plan to build a paved access road connecting our Whispering Pines subdivision to a massive, new luxury housing development. Ridgeview Estates, planned for the undeveloped county land on the other side of my wetlands. Karen Bollinger had been negotiating the deal for over a year. The developer, a large firm with deep political connections, had agreed to pay a hefty easement acquisition fee directly to the Whispering Pines HOA, a fee that would allow them to keep dues low for years and make the board look like financial wizards. But the most damning page was the budget approval. The redacted lines were now chillingly clear. Discussions centered on the proposal from KB, contracting, and the facilitation of the required zoning variance. Budget includes a 15% facilitation fee payable to KB, contracting for community outreach and preliminary site work. "It's a kickback scheme," I said, the words feeling heavy and cold. "She's using her brother-in-law's company as a pass-through to get a cut of the deal." "It's worse than that," Sarah said, pointing to another document, a preliminary zoning application. "To build that road, they need the county to rezone your easement from conservation to utility access. That's nearly impossible to do, unless you have friends on the inside." Sarah had done more digging. Karen's father, a prominent local businessman, had tried to develop this exact parcel of land back in the '90s. It was my father who had organized the community, lobbied the county, and successfully gotten the conservation easement established, killing the deal and costing Karen's family a fortune. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about money. It was revenge. It was Karen, 30 years later, trying to undo my father's greatest achievement and get rich in the process. This wasn't a fight over a drainage ditch. It was a battle for my father's legacy against a ghost from the past. The board was not just a group of petty tyrants. They were co-conspirators in a scheme of zoning fraud, financial kickbacks, and personal vengeance. The stakes had just been raised from my backyard to the county courthouse. The compliance deadline of November 12th was fast approaching, and the board was escalating its assault. Just as Sarah and I were mapping out our strategy, another certified letter arrived. This one was far more menacing than the first. It was a notice of fine and intent to file lien. The letter stated that, due to my continued non-compliance with the board's directive, a fine of $5,000 had been assessed to my account. The language was cold and clinical. It informed me that if the violation was not remedied and the fine was not paid within 30 days, the board would instruct its attorneys to place a lien on my property for the amount of the fine plus all associated legal fees. This was their checkmate move. A lien was a legal claim against my house, a black mark on my title that would make it impossible to sell or refinance. It was financial warfare, designed to cripple and intimidate me into submission. They knew a prolonged legal fight was expensive, and they were betting I didn't have the resources or the will to see it through. I immediately called Chloe. Her reaction was a mix of panic and "I told you so." Leanne Jensen, this is exactly what I warned you about. Her voice was sharp with fear for me. These people are not playing around. They will take your house. You have to pay the fine. Just clear a few bushes. Pay the $5,000 and make this go away. It's not worth it. Dad wouldn't want you to lose the house over some sentimental attachment to a swamp. It's not a swamp, Chloe. And it's not sentimental, I said, my frustration mounting. They're committing fraud. This is about a secret road and kickbacks. And you're going to be the one righteous man who takes them all down. This isn't the army. You don't have a battalion backing you up. It's just you. Please. Jensen. Cut your losses. Pay the fine. Her plea hung in the air long after we hung up. It was the voice of reason, of practicality, of self-preservation. For a moment, I felt the immense weight of her words. She was right. The risk was enormous. The fight was lonely. Was one small piece of land, even one so precious to me, worth my financial security? That evening, as I stood looking out over the wetlands, my mind a battlefield of doubt and resolve, I saw a familiar figure walking slowly along the common area path. It was Luis Rivera, my elderly neighbor from a few houses down. He was a retired history teacher who had lived in Whispering Pines since before it was even a formal subdivision. He leaned on a simple wooden cane, his back slightly stooped with age, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He waved me over. "Evening, Jensen," he said, his voice raspy but kind. "Heard the board is putting you through the ringer." "You could say that," I replied. He gestured with his cane toward the wetlands. "I remember when your father saved this place. 1994. We had that 100-year flood. Water was up to my back porch. The only reason half this neighborhood didn't wash away was because this marsh soaked it all up like a sponge. When that developer wanted to fill it in, your father went door to door with maps and rainfall charts. He taught us all a lesson about living with the land, not just on it." Lewis looked me square in the eye. "This isn't just your land they're after, son. It's the soul of the neighborhood. They want to pave over our memory, our history. They want to turn this place into every other soulless subdivision with no character and no respect for what came before. If you don't stand up, no one will. This isn't just your fight." His words landed with the force of a physical blow, scattering my doubts like dust. He wasn't appealing to my sentiment. He was appealing to my duty. He was reminding me that this battle was bigger than my lot line, bigger than my father's memory. It was for Lewis, for the other families who lived downstream, for the very integrity of the community Karen claimed to be serving. As we spoke, I glanced at his neat, tidy yard. In the corner, almost hidden by a large azalea bush, was his garden shed. It was a charming, well-kept structure where he stored his tools and potted his seedlings. I also knew, from a brief mention in some old board minutes Sarah had found, that it was technically non-compliant. It was a foot too close to his property line. Sarah had also uncovered a buried addendum from a few months back. Karen had personally fast-tracked a retroactive variance for Lewis's shed. A small, unpublicized favor to keep the well-liked old-timer happy and quiet. It was a perfect example of her selective enforcement, a tool she used to reward allies and punish dissenters. The knowledge sat in my mind like an unpinned grenade. I could use it. I could expose her hypocrisy, show the whole community how she wielded the rules like a weapon. But doing so would put Lewis's beloved shed in jeopardy. The new board, forced to be impartial, might have to order it torn down. My victory could come at the cost of the very man who had just solidified my resolve. I looked from Lewis's kind, weathered face back to the wetlands. My path was clear. I would fight, but I would fight with honor. I would win on the merits of the truth, not by sacrificing my allies. The annual homeowners meeting is next week. I said to Lewis, Tuesday, November 12th. I've registered for a 5-minute speaking slot. A slow smile spread across his face. Good. It's about time someone reminded them who this association is supposed to work for. The annual homeowners meeting was the board's yearly coronation, a carefully stage-managed event designed to project an image of serene, competent governance. It was held in the community center's main hall, a larger room with better acoustics and uncomfortable folding chairs arranged in neat, submissive rows. At the front, the board sat at a long, linen-draped table, a pitcher of ice water and a vase of grocery store flowers at its center. Above their heads, a large projector screen displayed the Whispering Pines logo. To its right, a bright red digital clock was set to count down each resident's allotted speaking time. I arrived early, carrying a simple cardboard box. Homeowners trickled in, clutching agenda packets and making small talk about the weather. I saw my sister Chloe near the back, her expression a tight knot of anxiety. She gave me a small, reluctant nod. Luis Rivera sat in the front row, his back ramrod straight, his cane resting against his chair. I took a seat in the middle aisle. Inside my box were 50 professionally printed folders. Each one contained a curated set of documents, a copy of my official plat map, with the conservation easement highlighted, the board's fake community plan map, the unredacted meeting minutes detailing the Ridgeview Connector project, a printout of KB Contracting's business registration showing Kevin Ballinger as the owner, and the budget approval showing the 15% facilitation fee. It was a concise, damning narrative told through their own words and records. Karen Ballinger, looking crisp and confident in a navy blue blazer, called the meeting to order. She moved briskly through the agenda, the treasurer's report, the grounds committee update, the holiday decoration contest announcement. It was a symphony of mundane suburban procedure. Finally, she arrived at the homeowner open forum. Each speaker will have 5 minutes, she announced, gesturing to the large red clock. First on our list is Mr. Jensen, from Lot 27 to discuss community land use. She said the words with a faint, dismissive curl of her lip. I walked to the podium at the front of the room. The clock started its countdown, 5:00, 4:59, 4:58. Good evening, everyone, I began, my voice calm and clear, amplified slightly by the microphone. Before I begin, I have a packet of information for each of you. It provides context for my remarks. As I spoke, Chloe and Lewis, as we had arranged, stood up and began quietly and efficiently distributing the folders down each row. A murmur of curiosity rippled through the room as people opened them. Karen's smile faltered. This was not on her script. For the past month, I continued, my eyes scanning the crowd. The board has been pursuing a violation against me regarding an obstructed drainage pathway on my property. They have fined me $5,000 and have threatened to place a lien on my home. 4:30, 4:29. The board has claimed its actions are based on the CC&Rs and a community master plan. Please turn to the first 2 documents in your packet. I paused as the rustle of paper filled the room. On the left is the board's map. On the right is the official, legally recorded plat map for my property on file with Allen County. As you can clearly see, the area in question is not a drainage pathway. It is a protected conservation easement. The board has knowingly and repeatedly misrepresented this fact, and in doing so, has instructed its contractors to trespass on private property. Derek Sandell shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Karen stared at me, her expression hardening to ice. 345, 344. This raises the question why. Why go to such lengths for a simple path? The answer is in the next document, the unredacted minutes from the board's own meetings, which they provided to me only after redacting the most crucial information. I could see people's eyes widening as they read. This project was never about a drainage ditch. It is, in the board's own words, Phase 1 of the Ridgeview Connector Project, a secret plan to build a paved road across the wetlands to service a new luxury housing development. A project that would destroy the natural floodplain that protects the lower-lying homes in our neighborhood. 255, 254. An angry mutter started at the back of the room. What road? Someone called out. Finally, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. We must ask who benefits from this secret project. Please turn to the last 2 pages. You will find the business registration for the contractor hired for this project. KB. Contracting. The owner is Kevin Ballinger, the brother-in-law of our board president, Karen Ballinger. A collective gasp went through the hall. You will also find the project budget, which allocates a 15% facilitation fee to Mr. Ballinger's company. This board did not just hide their plans from you. They engineered a scheme to financially benefit their own families at the expense of our community's safety and our shared funds. 110, 109. I looked directly at Karen. Her face was a pale mask of fury. In my mind, I saw the file on Lewis's shed. I could use it. I could deliver the final, killing blow, exposing her petty, selective tyranny. I saw Lewis in the front row, his face filled with pride, and I made my choice. This board has operated with a breathtaking lack of transparency. I concluded, letting the evidence speak for itself. They have broken our trust. They have misrepresented their actions, and they have put our homes and our finances at risk. The evidence is in your hands. My time is up. The clock flashed 0:01, then 0:00. I stepped back from the podium. For a heartbeat. There was absolute silence. Then, the hall erupted. The uproar was instantaneous and overwhelming. Homeowners were on their feet, shouting questions, waving the evidence packets in the air. The polite suburban veneer had been stripped away, revealing a raw, potent anger. A vote of no confidence. Luis Rivera's voice boomed from the front row. Cutting through the chaos. I make a motion for a vote of no confidence in the entire board of directors. Second, yelled a woman from the back. Karen banged her gavel, but the sound was lost in the din. This is out of order. This motion is not on the agenda, she shouted, her voice thin and shrill. But she had lost control. The room was no longer hers to command. The management company representative, a nervous young man named Tim, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly stood up. His face was ashen. He had seen the packets. He understood the words fraud, kickbacks, and liability. On behalf of Aegis Management, Tim announced, his voice trembling but loud enough to be heard. We advise the board that given the serious allegations and documentation presented this evening, we must recommend an immediate suspension of all board activities. Our company will cooperate fully with any independent audit or investigation. We cannot and will not be party to any actions that may expose the association or its members to legal jeopardy. He had thrown them under the bus. It was a clean, swift act of corporate self-preservation. Derek Sandell's face went white. Martha Prentice looked like she was about to be physically ill. A motion was made from the floor to hold an immediate emergency vote. It passed with a roar of approval. Paper ballots were hastily torn from notepads, as residents lined up to cast their votes in my cardboard box. I watched Karen Ballinger for a brief moment before she gathered her papers and stormed out of the hall. I saw the mask fall completely. It was not anger on her face, but a hollow, exhausted terror, a flicker of the human moment I was told to look for, a crack in the armor of a woman who had just lost everything. The votes were counted publicly. The result was near unanimous. The board was removed. A motion to immediately freeze the association's accounts and commission a full, independent financial audit passed just as decisively. In the chaotic aftermath, as a group of homeowners began to organize an interim board, my sister Chloe made her way through the crowd. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and awe. "Okay," she said, pulling me into a fierce, unexpected hug. So maybe it wasn't just a patch of mud. I looked over her shoulder at the wetlands visible through the community center's large windows, dark and silent under the moon. The land had been here long before Whispering Pines, and it would be here long after. Tonight, its silence felt less like indifference and more like a quiet, patient victory. Within a week, the old board was a memory, and the new interim board, led by a level-headed engineer and a retired accountant, was in place. Their first official act was to pass a resolution voiding all fines and legal actions against me. The lien that had threatened my home vanished, as if it had never existed. The independent audit Sarah and I had triggered became the talk of the neighborhood. The auditors, a stern-faced team from a downtown firm, descended on the HOA's records. What they found was even worse than we had imagined. The Ridgeview Connector scheme was just the tip of the iceberg. The final surprise, delivered at a packed town hall meeting a month later, was that Karen Ballinger had been embezzling HOA funds for years. It was a quiet, insidious theft, hidden in 1,000 small transactions, landscaping invoices padded by a few $100s, consulting fees paid to shell companies, personal vacations disguised as conference travel. The secret road project wasn't her first crime. It was just her most ambitious. A desperate attempt to secure a big payoff before the flimsy structure of her deceit collapsed. Criminal charges were filed. The polite suburban tyrant was now just another defendant in the county court docket. With the old regime gone, a new energy took hold in Whispering Pines. The fear of violation notices was replaced by a sense of shared ownership. I agreed to chair a new community-led environmental oversight committee, tasked with creating a long-term plan for the wetlands. We worked with the county to secure grants for restoration, planting native cypress saplings, and creating a small, unobtrusive boardwalk for educational tours. Several months later, on a bright Saturday morning, I stood at the edge of the wetlands. The air was clean, filled with the scent of damp earth and new growth. A small group of neighborhood children, Luis Rivera's granddaughter among them, gathered around me. They held notebooks and binoculars, their faces alight with curiosity. "This area is a floodplain," I explained, pointing to where the water flowed gently through the reeds. "That means when big storms come, the land acts like a giant sponge, soaking up the extra water so it doesn't flood our homes." My father understood that. He spent his life helping this land heal, so it could protect us. A young girl with big glasses raised her hand. "So the swamp is a hero." I smiled, crouching down to her level. "I think the land just is what it is. It follows its own rules. We're the ones who have to learn to listen to it." I watched them explore, their quiet footsteps a stark contrast to the roar of the bulldozers that had once threatened this place. My father's legacy wasn't just in the soil and the water anymore. It was here, in their faces, in their questions, in the simple act of a community learning to see the value in something wild and true. The fight was over. But the work of listening, of protecting, of remembering that would continue. And I was at peace with that.